For some, creative energy is inspiration. For others, it's oppressive. Because big ideas and big dreams can stay locked away behind big emotions. Welcome to Creative Energy, the podcast, for those who are caught between vision and resistance. I'm Linda, and along with my co-host Heather, we teach on the patterns that keep us stuck and highlight other creators' stories. Visit us at wearecreativeenergy.com to apply to be on the show. Hello, everyone. After this episode, I'll be taking a short European-style break for the month of August. I'll be back in September with more creative energy interviews and teachings and hopefully some new ideas. Heather had to move on to other projects this summer, sadly. She may join again for some episodes in the future, but for now, it'll be all me. I'm really grateful for what she's brought to this podcast. I don't know if I would have started it without her, and I really just love what we've created. So I want to acknowledge her contributions and how much fun we've had co-hosting the podcast along the way. While I'm on break, I'd still love to hear from you. Who would you like to hear on the show? What visionaries or creatives that may have big projects and big ideas that they're keeping hidden or just getting started? I'd love to hear your suggestions and know who you'd like to hear their story. What blocks are you wrestling with in your creativity? What are the topics you'd like me to cover or talk more in depth about? You can text the show down in the show notes or send me an email on my website. Today's show features a guest I hadn't gotten to talk to in about 5 years. She's someone I worked with in my corporate career, and she's someone that I would dream with on our lunch hours about our future businesses and things we wanted to create. So it's been really fulfilling to just watch her do the damn thing and get her company launched and see success in a short amount of time. I hope you will enjoy her story as much as I do. I think this is a really fun conversation and one that really touches on a deep subject for a lot of people, which is how do you stay true to yourself while honoring your family ties and your relational influences? Enjoy. Hello. Welcome, everyone. Today's guest is Priya Vij. She is the founder and product designer behind Hapny Home, a fashion-forward home hardware brand. Today, we'll talk about her family history in the hardware industry, her journey from journalism and economics to design and entrepreneurship, and the future vision of her company. We also have a juicy topic talking about relational influences and how they shape our creations. Welcome, Priya.
Thank you. I am very excited to be here and to chat with you.
Oh, I'm so happy to have you on. It's so good to see you.
You too.
So where I really want to start, because I think this is really a super interesting journey that you've been on, is how you got from journalism and economics to owning a home hardware brand.
Yes, I know it's a bit of a weird and interesting journey, as they often tend to be. I grew up really loving English and writing and talking to people and learning about stories and psychology and all of those things. So that was what I really focused on and excelled in high school, and then naturally majoring in journalism when I went to NYU in a place like New York City where there's so many different people and different outlets to get to explore. It felt like a really obvious choice for me. That being said, I also have a father who has had his own cabinet hardware company my entire life. So that was always in the background. That was where I spent my summers interning, dinner table talks, and just all throughout my childhood at home. It was very much a presence. But in the way that I was like, I will never do anything with this ever. And like steer clear of the family business. I don't care about this. I don't want to. And so I very much set out on my own path that made sense to me at the time. And that's the big joke that now I'm back here doing hardware in my hometown. But after studying journalism in college, I liked it, but I knew that it wasn't what I wanted to pursue professionally. And I did a double major in economics. kind of to protect myself to get a job in reality. And so I graduated and joined Macy's to do assortment and financial planning. From there, my strict Indian parents really pushed me to go get an MBA. So I went and got my MBA from UT Austin. And while there, kind of just got hung up on this idea of going to Nike and working at Nike. So from there, I got an internship at Nike, started in more of our strategy type team on the tech side, and then ultimately had my last role on our membership and loyalty team. So got to touch different parts of the company and explore a lot, and was there in 2020 was when I really started to think more and more about starting my own thing and exploring specifically this idea of a hardware company that built off a lot of the foundations that my dad had, but very much filled a gap that I saw in the market at the time that I wanted to keep exploring. So meandering way there, but ultimately ended up creating my own hardware brand.
How did your dad get into hardware?
He did it in a very non-romantic way, purely out of immigrant needs to survive. He had explored a couple different jobs when he moved to America. My mom came with him. They had an arranged marriage. They had my brother quite young and early into their marriage. So they basically just needed to get some cash on the table to survive. But my dad will say that he always knew he had to start his own thing because he just hated having a job. He was one of those people where he hated reporting to people. He hated not having the freedom. He would just take off when he didn't have vacation or when they told him not to. He was very rebellious as an employee, which tracks with his personality. He very much does his own thing. And so for him, it was less about hardware specifically and more about, okay, what practically can I get after and start to create the foundation for my own business for? And at the time, he had a friend back in India that had his own factory that was producing hardware and different accessories in that space. And so he partnered with him to just kind of hit the ground running. And a lot of the big brands that we see in the hardware industry today that are kind of the titans in the space, they all started around the same time. So it worked out timing wise, just that there wasn't really that much going on in the market just then. There was starting to be a growing interest. And he just happened to have this contact back in India. And that's where he got started with his path.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
It's such a unique industry. And I want to hear, because it was in your family, you obviously had a really deep understanding of how this industry worked and who the big players were, right? I feel like when we talked about this, sat down and talked about some of our visions.
Yeah.
Gosh, 2019?
I think so. It was before COVID for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And what I remember of that conversation is you felt almost like a gravitational pull. No pun intended, but
oh my gosh, I didn't even pick up on it. A gravitational pull. Yes, that's perfect.
Yes, back into this family business, but with your own knowledge and your own experience of moving around to different cities and living in rentals. But it almost felt like you felt like it was inevitable. I really didn't want this, but
yeah, kind of.
Here I am.
If I'm gonna do it, then let me at least do it my way. That's kind of with subconsciously and then ultimately consciously, that is kind of how it came to be. Because realistically, I didn't spend too many years in corporate America. I worked at Macy's for a year and a half, got my MBA quite early, and then was at Nike for ultimately 5 years until the end. But it wasn't like I had this decades long experience in corporate America and was burnt out and wanted to do my own thing. But part of my personality and sentiment, I think, mirrors what my dad felt, where I wasn't a rebellious employee, but I do think that there was this drive more than anything to just have the freedom to make my own choices of how I spend my time and what I do. And so I would say that was more than anything. It was yes, I had this idea. I saw this business opportunity. I wanted to actually pursue it. I felt passionate about it. I had the stability and the savings at that point to get started on it. All of those things were true, but there was always this need to just I hate being told when to work, and what to do. I mean, it's not a unique experience. I think it would be very hard to find someone who likes that, but I just think people have more tolerance for that than others. And I was just at this point where I was like, I was just getting so burnt out and so frustrated without even realizing, like, there was always kind of like a dark cloud. And I know that to be true because now on this side of it, where like my entire life is wrapped up in this business, I work so much more than I ever did at my last jobs. All of my like savings are on the line. The stakes are so much higher, but I just feel so much more relaxed and lighthearted and at ease. So I know that I think like listening to that and finding that as early as possible, despite all the risks and the really scary things. I mean, it's such a crazy time right now to run a business where I import from abroad, like to the point where it naturally could break my business, but still it feels so much better than before. And so I think I always had that feeling inside of me where I was like, I need to go do this. And then layering in this foundation that I had with my dad, where he had a lot of the basics figured out that I could tap into. And I also felt like there was really a chance to do something new and different and cool that mixed my aesthetic and my goals and just like my interests all into one. Felt like this thing I had to go get after and at least try. And then we'll see what happens. But here we are.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Yeah, tell me a little bit more about what your day-to-day looks like now and what your team looks like and how your company is structured.
The team is largely me. I am back in Houston, which is where I'm from. So I created a separate, for all intents and purposes, it's a fully separate company and brand than my father's. His company is based here. So it's nice to be here because I do get to help him just kind of clean up some things and like just optimize certain things with his business. But he and my brother largely run that. But so I'm here largely doing it on my own, but we do have our warehouse team that I'm able to work with, and they are great. They've worked with my father for, almost all of their professional lives. So they've seen me since I was very little and now like growing up into doing my own thing. So it's a really special relationship in that sense to get to work with them in this capacity. My day-to-day is very different every single day, which is part of the fun. So it keeps it interesting and it keeps things just moving. A huge part of what I need to focus on is traveling and visiting my showroom accounts in person, just getting to know the different teams, getting to talk about my product, especially anytime I release something new. If I'm able to go out there and meet them in person and have them put a face to the name, that really helps. So a huge part of what I spend a lot of my year doing is on the road, visiting different accounts in different cities and also just getting new accounts. I think you can do everything digitally, but I still love old school ways. And I think a lot of people still do, to where meeting face to face for some of those first interactions really makes such a big difference. So traveling is a huge piece of it. I also dedicate a couple hours every day to going and pulling and packing orders. So just doing a lot of the like menial tasks of just order management and fulfillment. That's a huge part of it. But the rest of my time is really spent on more of the creative future state things. So a lot of product development conversations and thinking about that. A lot of just inventory management and just process optimization as much as possible. That's a huge piece of it. Thankfully, the business model in and of itself isn't super complicated, and we have everything in stock in our warehouse here. So once we get all our product, it's at least on site. There's no like logistics around fulfillment in that regard. But just trying to make things work better and faster and continuing to grow and coming up with new ideas, I think is really my heads down focus for the next couple of years for sure.
Yeah, great. What part of the business do you feel like you enjoy the most? Is it the face-to-face?
Definitely. That's the one thing about having a like typical corporate job that I knew I would miss, but I definitely really miss it. It's just the face-to-face, the interactions. I get it with our warehouse team, which is great. And I think that's why I like love going to the office every single day still, is that I just love having that kind of rapport and fun conversation with people. And I miss like the networking aspect of it too. I think especially at Nike, it was just a group of really cool, interesting, fun people doing cool, interesting, fun things. And there's something about being around that energy, whether it's related to my business or not, whether it's related to design or not, just being around that inspires and encourages you to tap into that more. And I think that's something that I probably miss the most. And so just getting to like go to the market in person, getting to see people, getting to watch customers interact with hardware. I mean, it's valuable from a business perspective, but it's also just so fun and cool to like learn about how people exist in this world and things that I should take into account and getting to know them and chat with them. So I try to do that as much as possible, both for the business, but also personally. I think it's really fulfilling.
Yeah, absolutely. Are most of your accounts hardware stores? Like, I'm trying to think of the one in Portland that's kind of the main.
Chown.
Yeah.
We're in Chown, yes.
You're in town. Do you also work directly with the A&D community?
That's a big part of my future focus for the A&D community and the trade. When I started, it was very much just tapping into the showrooms, hardware showrooms, exactly, lighting and plumbing. They're often all grouped together. So I wanted to get after some of those key accounts in major cities and just get started and hit the ground running. There is this balance of people like new stuff and new brands and new stories, but also it's so hard to convince someone to try something new. And then there's this element of just, I trust MTech, I trust Hopknops, I trust these brands that have been around that are in this showroom I always go to. So I was trying to kind of play that game of I'm new, I'm exciting, look at me. But also, I'm in these showrooms, so that gives me more credibility. And yes, my dad is in the hardware industry. We use the same supplier, so I have 40 years of product history. Like there was a lot of having to finesse that story. And I just felt like at the start, it made the most sense. And it helped me not just grow faster, but that was just such a good learning experience of how people in these showrooms, what they look for, what they want to know about new products that they're bringing in, what their customers are asking for, like getting as much real-time market information as possible. And then lately, I have been getting more exposure to and growing within the trade community. And I think that's very much a shift that this industry is seeing and has been seeing for the past few years. But the trade community is just growing bigger and bigger and more powerful when it comes to working with manufacturers and vendors in the space. So I recently just participated in New York Design Week a couple of weeks ago, and I actually got to do part of a big show there called Shelter. So that was very much targeted towards the trade and to architects and designers. And I got to meet a lot of really cool people in the space and a lot of good contacts. So hopefully something that will continue to grow as I put myself out there more too and just get more exposure.
Yeah, amazing. And tell me conceptually what is driving your designing of your new products?
Everything. I sit there, I'm like, I just constantly, it's fun. Hardware is fun and overwhelming, but fun because it really can kind of be anything. Like to a certain extent, there's not many constraints of what you can piece together to then turn into a functional piece of hardware. There's like technical constraints, but from a design perspective, there's so much freedom and creativity with what you can bring to life. And so I think a lot of furniture, especially, is a very easy tangential category where there's just really cool shapes. There's really fun materials even, and just like mixing of materials. Lighting also has a lot of inspiration of the silhouettes, and they make sense to look to because they'll all in theory be working in a space together. So it makes sense to pick and choose from those industries too. But jewelry from the beginning has been something I
always say
earrings.
it's the jewelry of the home.
Yeah.
Right?
And
the
it totally is.
Yeah.
It totally is in terms of the role that it plays in a space, but also just jewelry and earrings and rings. There's so many fun different shapes and metals, and there's so much to get inspiration from there. So it's a little bit of everything. And then I recently was in Mexico City where the house numbers were super cool, and just seeing what exists architecturally already in a lot of spaces. And I'm lucky enough to get to travel to different countries and just get exposure to these different types of design. There's so much. Once you start paying attention to these things, now I'm just like always, like I'm touching the hardware that opens the door to the restaurants we always go to. Like I'm always just going rogue in public spaces and fondling all the hardware because there's so much once you start paying attention to it.
Well, what I love about this from, because I'm an interior designer by background, so I'm constantly looking at every detail of a space, and it is overwhelming, right? But what I love about like your journey into the design world has been this very specific, very seemingly small piece of the interior design world, but a really important piece. And then it does kind of like fractal out from that one focal point. So I'm curious kind of where you're seeing other products or things that you might bring in the future, what you're looking at.
I think some really natural next steps beyond cabinet hardware are looking to things like bathroom hardware, looking at things like hooks. But then house numbers are a great example of another accessory that's playing in the home space, but still kind of that like fixtures, all these little accessories and fixtures that you're adding on, but that are really important. Like house numbers are really important, and they're one of the first things that people see outside of your home. So they're very much from a design perspective hinting at what's to come inside, and I think worth paying attention to for someone who cares about aesthetics and cares about the design of their space. So I think those are some really easy, natural progressions for me to go into, even just like creating collections that complement what currently exists and kind of play off of the same themes, or just creating something totally new. But once you start getting into beyond the fixtures and the accessories, I think there's so much that has always drawn my attention that I think would be so fun to design. I think lighting is a bit tricky. I get nervous about the electrical elements of it, but just accessories, trays, home decor items, vases, even maybe jewelry, like going back to the things that inspire me. I think it would be so fun to marry the worlds of jewelry and hardware and play off some of the themes of my collection. So there's definitely a lot to do.
Absolutely. Tell me about when you first started Hapny Home, or even before that, because I remember you showing me a couple of designs prior. What was it like to start dabbling in the design world, coming from the background that you came from? Like, tell me more about your creative path that way.
Yeah. When I think about it for too long, I get very easily into imposter syndrome world where I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not trained in this, or I like haven't been a designer before. And it's very easy to kind of go down that path. But part of what was fun about not having this more structured traditional design background is that I didn't really think about constraints in that way. Like I was truly just like, I see this thing that looks cool over here and it's a necklace. And I think that you could do this and this, and then it's a pull. Like it was just as simple as that. And so, of course, then there are technical elements and true like design details to start to consider. And I've just through experience of putting stuff out there, of getting feedback, of hearing what other customers are doing, of looking more closely at what my competitors and peers are bringing to market and the things that they're highlighting and like technically paying attention to, I've been able to gain so much more knowledge and understanding of like true design elements and technical elements of what I want to do. But when I started, I kind of was just like, this stuff looks cool and I think it would be really fun. And then my partner at my factory in Taiwan, that's where we source everything from, he was very, very technical. Like we were complete art and science. And so it was like a good partner to have at the beginning to really understand and get a sense of, okay, no, these things are not technically sound and like these are not feasible. And so just been getting more sophisticated over time through experience, which I think is always a risky way to learn, but the best way to learn.
Hey, 100% agree. And I mean, I've said it on this podcast many times, which is design school is amazing and you can go to the best ones and you can come out and have a really successful career, but it does actually cut some people off at the knees. And because that imposter syndrome doesn't actually go away with design school, you are just in constant comparison and remembering a tough critique that you got, or remembering some hard and fast rule that one professor said that actually doesn't apply, or right. So you just kind of pick up a lot of baggage along the way, alongside all the learning that you're picking up. right? So it can actually kind of make your imposter syndrome worse because you think
Sucks.
somebody else really got it and you didn't. So I actually love having guests on that didn't come from that traditional creative background, because I think there are so many people out there that know they have a vision in them and know they have something really creative that they want to bring into the world, and they stop themselves because they think they need all of these qualifications. So sometimes that varied background is actually a thing that propels you further because you don't have those constraints.
Super interesting and makes sense.
Yeah. Well, I commend you for getting as far as you have. And I
Thank
know you're going
you.
to go so much further.
Oh,
And I'm so
thank
excited
you.
for you.
Thank you. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Seeing you launch was like a yes.
I know you have like a funny experience as part of my journey because you were there from the very, very early beginning stages. So it's special to get to connect with you now.
Yeah. Yeah. It's awesome. I want to switch gears to a very sensitive topic, which is how relationships can influence our creativity and our visions, and how we bring or don't bring things out into the world. And I know that you have a really unique perspective, and in some ways, maybe not unique, but we all feel that we are alone, maybe, in this journey. And I will say here, before I ask you to share, the creative path really does force us to drop a lot about other people's opinions on the way. Because if someone doesn't think you're delusional or crazy, you're probably not on a creative path or on a visionary path. And sometimes the people that love us the most because they want to keep us safe are some of those loudest voices that could really kill our creativity and kind of keep us small for our whole lives, right? And so this topic of relational influences as being a creative block is the one that I want to discuss and unpack with you and hear about your personal journey with.
Yeah. What a journey. lots to say and feel about it.
Yeah. Just tell me a little bit about your upbringing and some of your biggest relational influences just in general.
So I grew up with parents, like I mentioned, who immigrated to America from India. They had an arranged marriage. I'm Hindu, and Hinduism is just like a deeply cultural, spiritual feeling that, even though we're not maybe so religious per se, the culture just persists through everything that we think and say and do. And so I grew up very rooted in my culture. And I think I carry a lot of the same struggles that any first generation child feels of just trying to blend into American culture. And I've been raised in Houston, been in Texas my whole life, which thankfully Houston is a very diverse city. So I had that growing up, but just those internal struggles of trying to find my place in American society, but also be Indian and never being enough of either to really find a sense of belonging and self. And so that defined a lot of my upbringing. And I would say my parents objectively also were kind of textbook very strict. And so it's hard to disentangle that from all of the like educational and career and creative journeys that I then also continued on. Like we're a very tight knit family. We're very close, but and my parents wouldn't agree, but I was quite sheltered, and it was very much like a closed household. And there's a lot of work that I've had to do to just break away from that. And I think going to college in a place like New York City, at a school like NYU, where you're immersed in the city, and it was like this total earth shattering moment for me. And I think that's what really kicked off my path of like breaking free from these expectations and whatever of the household and childhood that I was raised in. It's hard to not let all of that then affect the fact that my dad had this hardware business. And even if I did find interest in it, it was so tangled up in family. And I think in a family where everything's already messy, to then also bring in like professional and personal and family and everything in one place, that's why I think I was just like, no way. And so who knows? I probably had this seed and desire from the beginning, but just punted it until I felt strong enough or safe enough to like actually pursue what it meant. And for me, being professionally independent and having my own source of income, having my own life path and career path was really, really important to me. And so for a long time, I just avoided this part of my life and did something totally different. And I think by the time I actually came around to wanting to explore Hapny, that is why I think I made it separate. It was never, I want to now go join the family business and take it to this new direction and this new place that you haven't gone before. I felt like the way that would set me up for the most success and kind of keep things as separate as possible while like diving back into the chaos of everything being muddled was for having my own company and doing it separately, but kind of together, but kind of apart. And so,
Yeah.
I think subconsciously looking back, I'm like, that was like the best way to get after it, but also still be boundaried and save myself from whatever the chaos would have been of just not. And so that was a huge, huge journey for me to come to terms with, feel good about. And then I think moving back home was a really big thing. And inherently, okay, on paper, we're two different companies, but we're very much doing the same thing. I'm sitting in the same city as my father. We're using the same warehouse. So the lines still very much get blurred. And there's a lot of benefits. I can't pretend like there aren't. Like there's been so many amazing moments, even just with my dad. I think it allowed our relationship. You know, we had a tense personal relationship, to say the least, before this moment, but being able to show up as two professionals has brought this really interesting dynamic to our relationship that we just never would have been able to explore before. And I think there's been a lot of good that has come of that, of just, it really allowed him to see me as this independent person. And now what I'm building with Hapny, I think he's able to see that I can bring my vision to life. You know, at the end of the day, I'm still always trying to be like, Dad, like, be proud of me. And untangling that is hard, but I think being able to just show him so directly, and also just for myself to understand that we had the same foundation, but start to trust myself that I can now take this in a new place. And with his support and with his foundation, slowly start to evolve. I think I'm only starting to get to the evolve chapter this year and right now. Like I'm just starting to step into that. Whereas the last few years, I would say the biggest thing that held me back was just feeling like I needed to please him and make him proud and do everything the way that he did it. And I fell trapped to that a bit, and I would find my little ways to do my own thing. But that's where the imposter syndrome comes in. That's where just like not trusting my own voice and being a child again in this weird, like, it's not just, you know, boss or peer. It's like father child. That was really messing with me too, of like, oh, I have this idea. And at Nike, I would pitch it to my director and we would pursue it and I would have colleagues help me. Now it's like I'm a little kid pitching this idea to my dad about my company. And it's so hard to break from those roles. And even if I break from it, he doesn't really break from it. So it's been messy. And I think the last 3 years, there's been a lot of good, but there's been a lot of challenges. And just now is when I'm kind of creating more boundaries of the boundaries, where I'm trying to just be like, okay, I have a sense of my voice. I have a sense of where I'm playing in the market. And it kind of has shaken out as a bit of a different place than my dad in terms of where we're showing up in the market. And so now I feel more confident kind of pursuing this more independent path in that sense.
What do you think the shift was? Was there an event or was it something more internal?
I think it was internal. Part of it too was once I got a sense of, okay, Hapny is successful in my stage of understanding of what success is. Like I generated a profit year over year. I started to have conversations on my own terms. Like my first year, my dad went with me on all my sales calls. So it was still in this weird bubble of like, I'm his daughter. This is father child. This is Hapny and RK, we're together. Whereas then I had a year of just doing it all on my own. And I would have my own relationships with my reps and my own relationships and dynamic and conversations with people in the showroom. And I started to see success. I started to see people respond well to that. And so it's just it's like getting the confidence that I'm putting myself out there and I'm receiving positive feedback. The business is growing. I'm doing well year over year. So just getting the confidence of like, okay, I'm not delusional. I know what I'm talking about. I have a voice and an opinion that is valid and worthy of being heard, at least in some place in the world. And so that confidence helped me internally feel better about just being like, I'm going to pursue this path. And he doesn't agree. And 9 out of 10 times he doesn't agree or he doesn't get it. And it's not combative or contentious. It's just we're different. We're of different mindsets. And now I have more confidence in myself to just pursue that regardless. So it was more just a slow burn over time. And then, of course, the external validation, as much as I hate to say external validation is what did it, but I think I needed that little boost to give my internal self the confidence to be like, no, I know what I'm doing. And I have the tenacity to go after and at least try and see what happens.
I feel like you've selected your own soul's journey in doing a family business not in the family.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like a parallel path with the
Totally.
family business.
Yeah. It's interesting.
It sounds very healthy. Like it sounds very healthy because family businesses can get so messy, right? And they can get so like there are no boundaries of time or vision or any of that, right? So I feel like the way you're doing this is actually a really interesting model.
It is.
And it's a big soul growth path because you didn't have a strong relationship with your father before. And to actively choose this in light of that is
crazy.
Take some chutzpah. Yeah.
Sometimes I'm like, what? Like, what did I do? And I'll have this moment of just like, oh my goodness. So it's not all peachy and rosy, but thank you for saying that and seeing it as that. And that's kind of how now that there's space and I can look back at it a bit, I think my gut and subconscious knew somewhere all along. Like, I remember there were a lot of moments of just, this doesn't make sense. Why are you two separate companies? And even from my showrooms, I mean, real estate space in a showroom.
It's easier for them.
They're like, well, we're going to have to take down your dad's product and put like, I get the question once a week still of when are you guys going to consolidate? It doesn't make sense that you're separate. And I'm glad that the little fire within me was like, no, like stay do this. And it's both from a business perspective, but especially from a personal perspective, I think the right path that I needed to take and be on. And there's absolutely benefits that we can help each other and we do help each other, but being able to come home and say, it's ultimately my decision. I have autonomy. I have the ability to make this choice for Hapny. Knowing that my voice wouldn't be heard in the same way for his business is just, it's the only thing that gives me peace of mind.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. It's crazy.
What would you tell your younger self going into entrepreneurship alongside your family, but not with your family, on how to manage that relational voice, right? That very loud voice, whether it's your dad's or anyone's, that says, you're still a child. You can't do this. This isn't the way things are done.
Mm-hmm.
Because it sounds like you're coming out on the other side of that. So I'm curious what advice you'd give to others or your former self.
Yeah, I think that's very real and absolutely something that I struggled with and still do. I'm getting better, but I think, yes, that was probably one of the hardest things, if not the hardest thing for a very long time. But I think that's where it's so cheesy and it's not really helpful, but it's just to trust your gut. Like you and I have had many conversations. I think we're of the energy where we're very in tune with our bodies and our energy and what's going on around us. And that's something that I've always had and paid attention to and known about myself. And that's where I took the risk on that intangible voice and feeling that, yes, okay, maybe these things are true and my dad's creating doubts in my head or whatever. The world is creating doubts in my head about whether or not I'm qualified enough or good enough or whatever. I mean, that's always going to be there. And I think my situation was just compounded because it wasn't just the world or a boss or a person. It was also my father. So then there's these biological human elements that are so hard to disentangle and work through. But I had also, prior to that, spent 12 years outside of the house building my life and my sense of self and my identity. And that work in those 12 years is what had the little voice and the little fire to be like, just hold on to this, like, do it this way, give yourself, like, trust in yourself, trust in the fact that, yes, okay, people are going to tell you you're delusional and that's not the right way and that's not the way things are done and this is really hard, blah, blah, blah. But you have to trust in your voice and your knowledge that you are good enough and that you know something. And there are less risky ways to explore that feeling. And that's kind of the route that I took was, okay, I think that this is true, but then I'm also confused by all this other negative feedback. So let me try to like explore this in the least risky way possible. And then now I'm at the point where I'm like, okay, I'm glad I did that. But now I also feel more confident that I was right. And like, yes, there's always room to grow and be better, but that little voice was right. And I've listened to her and grown. And so I think just trusting your gut and knowing your power and knowing your worth, despite what everyone else is saying and doing, is the most powerful thing you can do for yourself.
I think it's just true. I mean, the only way that people can ever find out if it's true or not is to take the risk.
Yeah, fully agree. And so how do you craft a risk that still feels okay to take it and isn't going to totally cripple you? Because I think that sentiment also can just be really scary to then go all in and
100%.
like, so like I kind of baby stepped my way there. I knew that that's where I wanted to go. And sometimes I feel I can like get down on myself for baby stepping it, but I'm like, no, I needed to do that. Like that was the right way to do it.
I mean, that's the only way our nervous system will allow us to do it.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise, if you blow out your nervous system, then on the other side of that is you sabotaging.
Totally.
Which people do, right?
Yeah.
You hear these crazy stories of somebody got to the top of some company and that did something absolutely
crazy.
Bananas.
Yeah.
And you're like,
and
why would you burn all that down?
Yeah.
Yeah. But that's why, is because they go too fast or they didn't actually want the thing, or it was outside of their comfort range of what their sense of self was. And so they have to burn it down to feel safe again.
That's so crazy. Yeah. But so human. And when you break it down like that, I'm like, yeah, that makes complete sense. Like so
baby stepping it is the way. We just are always comparing ourselves to the finished product of everybody else's visions. And some people are better at communicating their visions than others. And some people have whole teams working on communicating their visions. And so we don't have a very good metric for what baby stepping actually looks like.
Totally. And talking about baby stepping is not sexy. It's sexy to come on here and say, oh, in 1 year, I've 100x'd my business and now we're on track to do it again. Like, and that's all with Instagram. I mean, that's like a whole separate beast. With Instagram, then you get in the comparison game, but you also no one's talking about the slow and steady and baby step growth.
And packing orders in a warehouse.
Yeah. That's not sexy and cool. Like,
yeah. That's the chop wood, carry water of entrepreneurship, though.
Yeah.
That is the real.
And I think it's the healthier, and not for everyone, but for me, it was for sure the healthier way to go about this to ensure longevity and just sustainability. And so do it. Take the baby step and trust your voice and your gut and trust that you can do it.
Yeah, I love that. What came to me when you were speaking was this concept of like, does nepotism even exist? And I say that because the other phrase that came to me was like, have you heard this quote? I don't know who said it, but it's like, if you think you're enlightened, go be with family for a week.
Yeah, yes. I think about that a lot.
Yeah, I bet you do.
Yes. Like, I have so much growth. Never mind. Like one
Never
meeting.
mind.
Yeah.
I'm a
No,
teenager
it's
again.
very true.
Yeah. Yeah. But in thinking like, does nepotism exist? Of course it does, right? Of course it does, in the sense that like people get steps ahead of other people and leg up in the world of business and finance and all of that. Privilege exists, blah, blah, blah. But you could ask most people, would they want to work directly with their parents? Most people would say absolutely not.
I would say this venture, more than anything, has been a personal venture first before a business venture, like in reflecting upon it to this point. It is for me. And, there's plenty of cases where that's dialed up or down, maybe some cases where it's just not even true. And there's really healthy, functional, emotionally regulated, communicative dynamics. I have none of those things. And so I used to always joke, which is messed up to say, but like, I have the warehouse where like we have these benefits, and I would always joke that I'm paying for it in emotional abuse because I am. And so that's my contribution to myself, is like, I could go the route of a VC and funding and owing percentages of my revenue and profits to these strangers. Or I could take like a financial benefit, but then also endure this really intense emotional, personal, and that work is hard. Like,
that work
when
is so
my
hard.
personal identity is messed up in the world because of this dynamic, that's one thing. But when I am driving my business and responsible for making the future of my business, and I'm dealing with these like personal demons that are now all muddled together, like that's really painful and exhausting. And I often have days where I'm like, I would rather just work for the man and like be able to compartmentalize this, but that's not the path that I meant to be on. So yes, nepotism comes at a cost.
Can you speak any more about the current state of your relationship? Because you said you have made some serious progress there, right? In terms of how you two relate, but it sounds like it's still really challenging.
Yeah, I think we're fundamentally just different in how we communicate. And I cannot undermine how important that is. I know we all feel that pain point in micro moments and in major moments every day, with family, with friends, with peers, with strangers. But I think that's probably one of the hardest things, is just the communication element of it, and how there's just like a kindness and a tone. And part of it's cultural too. My father grew up in a very like, men should be the workers, no emotions, nothing, like that's very much his mentality. He's in his 70s. He's not going to change. He was a businessman that created something from nothing, like is a really hard worker and has that track record for himself. So like has made it, being a very specific type of immigrant male in this country. So I get it, but like the communication aspect of it is really hard. And again, I think that separation or lack of separation of personal and business. And when he says this thing about me as a daughter, what does that mean about me as a business owner and entrepreneur? Like they're so connected, and working through that is hard. So the thing that has probably helped us the most is that I kind of reached this breaking point where I was like, for a long time, I didn't live in the same city. I created physical space to help, and we could only discuss like 10 topics. Why are you getting married? Here's things about your like as I got older, there were just less things that he could comment on. And so by going into the business, and directly this business where I help him and we're the same business and he has so much experience that he can comment on, I like opened up a major can of worms. And now live in the same city. So there's a lot of just personal things that can get thrown in that couldn't before. So all of this to say that I think I just reached a breaking point where I was so oversaturated with feedback and unsolicited feedback and just proximity that I was either going to completely break, or I had to start setting some boundaries. And so if anything, it just forced my hand to step up for myself and I don't have the luxury of getting on a flight and being far away. I have to choose and understand how to create boundaries and space by being in the same place. And it's a much harder exercise, but it actually has forced me to confront some things. It's changed our dynamic in that sense of before I was just kind of denying everything and I was just hiding behind distance and I was hiding behind, okay, we'll have this conversation once every month so I can tolerate it type thing. Now we're interacting multiple times a day about multiple topics, sometimes in person, sometimes on the phone. And so by creating a better headspace for myself, by setting boundaries and being able to like say the thing that I was scared to say, I just show up better. A lot of it is just that I now show up in service of myself and therefore can handle the interaction better because I'm not hiding all these feelings of like resentment and just tolerating it and just doing whatever because I couldn't do that anymore. And so I don't know that he would agree the relationship is better, but I, at least in my understanding of our dynamic and the role that I play in our relationship is better for me and I feel better. And so
The
that's
beauty of
all I can really
boundaries.
do. I know boundaries are great. I always heard, and
Boundaries are
like
amazing.
boundaries in our culture are so, in Indian culture, it's like, no way. And so finally being able to do that and the thing that I've always heard about and known I need to do. And it came about from a place of like, if I don't do this, I will not survive, but it came about. And so now we're here with boundaries.
Yeah. There's this great story, I think it was from one of my teachers, where she said something about creating a boundary with her father. And her father's blustery reaction was like, boundaries? I didn't teach you to do teach you anything about boundaries.
It's like, yeah, no, got
Yeah,
it.
no.
That's the point.
Yeah.
That's
But-
so accurate. Yes, true.
Yeah.
That's what it
How
is.
dare you use that? I didn't teach you that.
That's not why I sent you to school to learn boundaries.
Yeah.
That's what it is. But it is a game changer. We love a
It is a game
boundary.
changer. Yeah. I love a good boundary. Talk about it all the time. So going back to just this topic of relational influences, maybe that is the key right there. Boundaries. And sometimes they're internal, right? So setting a boundary with boundaries are all, I'll just do a little teaching moment here, but boundaries are always about ourselves. So boundaries are always about what we will do, not what the other person will do, because you cannot control what another person will do, right? So boundaries are always something, I do it with my 3-year-old several times a day, which is, if you do X again, I will no longer participate. I will no longer be in the room. I will no longer have you on my lap, whatever that is, right? And we get to do this with anybody in our lives, especially the people who end up with those really loud voices that echo and are there even when they're not in the room. Those are usually the people that need the boundary. You need to set the boundary with those people, because there's been so little boundary that now they've taken over your own internal voices.
That's crazy. No one deserves that space. I mean, without deserving it. That's a really valuable thing to give away.
Yes. Yes. And so in creating, if you speak to me this way, I will no longer be available for X. Or if you show up for me, or if you do this action again, then we can no longer relate in this way. And most of the time, they're pretty darn effective.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's been a big learning. I think there's also a weird power dynamic aspect to it too. And that's why like with my father and like with these men, it's been like a really interesting space that I've avoided stepping into for a long time. But that's even where with my business, I mean, it's a very male dominated business. A lot of the people that I'm interacting with my new accounts, anything like that, it's changing. But historically, I mean, hardware, plumbing, a lot of this stuff is like really male dominated. And so it's been that power dynamic element too of just being able to like trust that I have a right to have a boundary and step up and say these things too has been something that I've had to work through a lot the last couple of years.
For sure. And I would say, I mean, I don't know much about that field, but just being in the A&D world, a lot of these material sources, fixture sources are ripe for disruption. It's been happening this way for decades. And I'm sure your father at some point is going to retire, right? Along with a lot of his peers.
Yeah. So that first generation of like these companies getting started are reaching that point. And so I think that's where there's a lot of new activity coming in.
Yeah, which is going to be really interesting to watch because people, I think, are going back to wanting to know where things come from. And we're seeing it like a forced situation with the tariff threats because people are like, oh, I don't want to pay more. But there's also a lot of people who are in the creative space and in the environmental space and really wanting to know, like, is this thing worth purchasing? Is this thing going to last? Is this thing going to be just another piece of garbage? Or is it something that has a story behind it and a person behind it? So I can see you really blowing up even from that perspective. I'm sure, the product looks amazing as well, but like that you get to be the face of this new generation is going to take you really far.
I know, I just got to put myself on camera. That's the one thing that I need to do.
Tell me about that. What is the barrier with that? I don't see you as somebody who really wants to hide, but you told me that you do like to hide.
I don't know. I'm sure it's all wrapped up in some of the same stuff. And then I think also I present as an extrovert and I like to meet people. I like to have that relationship. I like to talk and hang out. But I'm really a total introvert. And to put myself out on the internet is so vulnerable and scary. And I think I'm already grappling with so many vulnerable and scary things over here that like now I don't need to subject myself to putting my face on the internet.
Well, it might blow out your nervous system, right? Like it's not the step right now.
Yeah. And so I have to respect that because if I don't feel good, that's going to come through. And so I've been working on that because that is very genuinely a part of Hapny was I don't know the faces behind. When I started, there were no faces behind any of the hardware brands. And that genuinely was a thing that I felt where hardware is so intimate. I'm asking you to put 100 pieces of my thing in your home and then touch them every single day. Like that's like a really vulnerable touch point with someone. And to just have it be masked behind this faceless, brandless company didn't feel right. And so that was a lot of the spirit of starting it. And that's why Hapny's name is so rooted in my own personal journey. There's so much around that. But then I was like, okay, bye. Like, I'm not going to actually show up now. So I'm working on it, but it's a journey.
Yeah, it's a journey for me too.
But you're putting yourself out there. So I love it.
Yeah. And I mean, it was just the natural next step for me too, So like you just have to get to the place where it's the natural next step.
It feels right. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much for being on today. This was a super fun conversation.
Thank you so much for the time. Always good to chat with you.
Yes. All right, everybody. Thank you for being here. Till next time. Thanks for listening. Want to go deeper into this work? Join the waitlist so you're first to know when the Creative Energy course opens. The link is in the show notes.